Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jaya Kula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
I feel like we're in a moment of disaster, but it's also like part of some crisis ordinary. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on the responsibility of the spiritual practitioner.
Well, I think first and foremost to keep practicing, to stay grounded in your practice and grounded in the view. Try to work with everything that's happening, because you said practitioner, not necessarily someone who's highly realized. So it's easy to get swept away into various conditions that render you less helpful to yourself and others. I would say that the first and foremost responsibility, if you're being in our practice, is to use these circumstances as a way to deepen your practice. We all find ourselves tested by the things that were happening and our responses to that. We're all learning about ourselves and applying our practice and applying the view, looking for ways that we can relax and be more open-hearted even in the face of disaster, I think is our first responsibility. What that looks like outwardly is completely up for grabs. This tradition doesn't say there's one particular form of life that everyone should be following. It doesn't say we should be in ashrams. It doesn't say we should flee disasters. It doesn't say we should stay and be in a disaster. It doesn't really have any advice like that, because it's assuming that we each have our unique dimension. We're each going to express our lives differently. And as long as we're sticking to our sadhana and being in the state of our practice as much as possible, it doesn't actually matter what the outward form of our life is. When we're being more in the state of our practice, what needs to happen just happens. When we're not being contrived, when we're not trying to formulate some sort of spiritual persona or decide in advance how we're supposed to be, then we can just be in the state of our practice and be more spontaneous and meet the moments more spontaneously with an open heart and more skillfulness and more clarity. And that's all that's really required. We don't actually need to have a plan of how it's best for us as practitioners to do something. If we're being in our hearts and we're being in our practice, whatever we're doing, whatever we're saying is the best we could do in that moment. I'm not talking about people that are like super realized. I'm just saying ordinary people who are doing practice, who have incomplete realizations of those practices. You can still be in the state of your practice as best you possibly can, not letting yourself think, oh, things are so hard, I can't practice now, or something like that, or letting yourself get totally carried away by your habit pattern emotions. If you can do that as much as possible, be in that more relaxed condition as much as possible, that is the best thing you can do. And then whatever comes out of your mouth, however you relate to people or wherever you live, whatever form of life your life takes, that is all fine. The condition you're in comes before what the form of your life looks like. The condition you're in should give rise to the form of your life naturally, rather than deciding on some form.
What if what arises naturally then is pictures of cats instead of talking about Gaza? That sounds like a smart alecky question, but I'm really wondering.
The question was about practitioners, and in this tradition particularly, one of the hallmarks of being more relaxed and being more open is you are more moved by life. Whatever you're doing, you're not hiding from life. You could be living on the mountain, you could be living in a cafe, whatever you're doing. Even if you're relating to cats, there's going to be some way in which you are expressing a natural desire to be helpful, whatever you're doing.
I know someone who sends their pet pictures to the one in Gaza.
I'm loving this satsang. I feel like the Dharma, the view, and the sense of connecting in the most honest way with what you have is enough. And every time I have a question, I can hear you say, keep practicing.
Yeah, and it's going to look really different. Like that way of connecting in the moment is going to look really different for different people. I've had people come to me and say, students and other people say they're afraid that they're not doing as much as I'm doing around Gaza. They're afraid I'm going to judge them. I came back to this form of life after a hiatus. I was politically engaged and community engaged since I was really a little girl. And then for about 10 years after I took sannyas and I was doing some other stuff, I just decided for various reasons to not participate and to not vote. So for 10 years, I did not participate at all or vote. And then I just decided to come back into it like it was a different stage of life. And this is my natural form of life. I like this. I'm enjoying participating in this life. But that doesn't mean it has to look the same for every person. And I don't expect it to. What I have been dismayed by isn't people who aren't saying certain things, but people who are clearly not being moved by what's going on. Mainly, people who are in the position of spiritual teachers who are literally not taking care of their flocks. They're not taking care of all the different emotions and conditions and fears of the people that they're supposed to be supporting. And they're not doing anything that shows that they're actually moved by any of this. And I just find that to be like, okay, that's fine, but I don't think you should be in the seat of a teacher if that's your condition. We're here to be moved. Ma said, she had this word that a lot of you know, kayal. Kayal is a form of improvisational music. And we know that when we're improvising, there's a way in which there's this energy field that's established and you're being moved by that circumstance. There's a kind of weird, uncanny spontaneity to it where your skill is invoked, but in a sense you're being incited to move by what's happening. And this is what Ma's talking about. She said, what are you people talking about freedom? I don't have freedom. I have chaos. I have this improvisation. And she said, I don't do anything unless I am moved to do it by chaos. But the implication of that is that our entire lives could be motivated by the sense of being moved. Since I first encountered this from Ma many, many years ago, I really got it. It just felt like something that really was already in me and just needed to get called out. And I really understand now, many years later, having practiced for many more years, how much that is part of realization. Just being in this situation and being moved by it. And that means moved to action, but also just moved in a simple way. Moved to tears or moved to joy for someone, on behalf of someone, or moved to help, to actually care for their students. And we just had this conversation, and I think anyone could glean from that conversation that there's people in this community in many different conditions and circumstances, and there's some people in this community that are much more vulnerable to what's happening in the world right now than other people. There's other people who have more privilege and are more insulated, or whose difference is less visible. If we're being in the world, being moved, if that's our form of life, then we're being moved by that and by our students and by the desire to support people to continue to practice, like you said. And we're not just sitting back and putting on some face of spiritual equanimity. Long rant. But it's to say that it is enough to connect and just be in the state of your practice. And then out of that flows your natural form of life. And so what's flowing out of me is my natural form of life.
And reading your book, The Reality Sutras, there was this passage that gave me a little glimmer, but then I didn't really understand it. So I jotted it down. And this is your sentence from the book. Insentience manifests when aham is totally obscured. As in, for example, a toaster. But I wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so aham means I am. It's the grammatical formulation, but it's also one of the key mantras in Trikashaivism. So we use it in practice. Aham. So the A is pronounced like the in the English word but. So it's aham. And it is the I am that is announcing itself in everything. It's a way of pointing toward and evoking the self-awareness that is inherent in everything. So if you say I am something, that is a form of self-awareness. You're reflecting on yourself. The very formulation I am is sort of the essence of self-awareness. And this whole reality is self-aware in full, in every aspect. But when it purposefully and playfully limits its perceptions to create different forms, it can do so to such a degree that it creates versions of itself that are play acting insentience. This is easy to see with us because we're not insentient. We have an I am, we have self-reflection, we have self-awareness, but we have limited self-awareness. We don't know all that much about ourselves. And we're constantly wondering about ourselves and stuff like that. So you can see that in us, that I am of everything is somewhat limited. It has created the artwork of you by somewhat limiting itself. It can do so, though, to a much greater degree in order to create for itself an experience of rocks or cars or toasters. So in this tradition, there's not actually any insentience. Everything is sentient when it's seen from that more absolute perspective. And then insentience, or lack of self-awareness, is more of a local relative experience that is being enjoyed by this reality. God is enjoying playing the role of the toaster. The toaster is performing the role of an insentient object, but it is imbued with the full self-awareness of God.
Would it be fair to say that God knows the toaster, but the toaster doesn't know itself? Or am I off track? Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. This is why I say that people who are vegetarians and are in non-dual traditions, who explain their vegetarianism by saying that we shouldn't eat animals because they are sentient beings, are not really being in non-dual traditions. I mean, I think there's reasons not to eat animals. I'm not against vegetarianism, but that particular reason, making this big divide between animals and other forms of life here, especially like plants, even, because now there's plenty of research that plants also have forms of awareness. So where do you draw the line, really? I've gone through sometimes in my life where I've been vegetarian, and the reason I did my first time I did it because my boyfriend was vegetarian. I was only 13. I can be excused. But a couple other times I did it because I felt I wanted to be in solidarity with animals who were so mistreated. So I think there's reasons, but it's not because they're so different in category from other beings.
I feel like my memory has changed as I've relaxed and that I've forgotten things, but in a good way, just being more absorbed in life or like in contact with another person and not having little thoughts that are pulling me away, like, oh, I need to remember to like be this way or talk this way, or even, oh, I could do this thing later, I want to remember that. And it's been kind of surprising and really lovely to be like, oh, I forgot about myself for a minute there.
Mm-hmm.
But it also makes me think about sitting and forgetting.
Meditation.
Yeah, I'm curious if you could talk about that a little.
What you're describing about memory is really the leading edge of a change in your perception of time. Memory is one of the ways we create a sense of linear time. And when we're being more immersed in presence and it feels like we're not remembering as much in a relaxed way, that's how we begin to enter into more of a sense of Maha time, or time as volume rather than a line. And we're just there, and things are happening or not happening, and we're experiencing that and being immersed in that. And memories might happen, but we're not constructing linear time anymore. This is one of the reasons why when people first start to let go of their inner narration, whatever it looks like, it usually has a lot of memories in it or future projecting, depending on the person. But when you first let go of that, even for a moment, it can really feel scary. You know, that simple Dzogchen practice of ordinary presence, where you just narrate what's happening. Say, I'm reaching for my cup, I'm picking my cup up, I'm sipping water, I'm swallowing, I'm putting my cup back down. You're doing that silently, in a very neutral way. But when you do that, it replaces that linear time narrative. And this seems ridiculous, but some people get terrified just doing something like that for a few minutes, because you just suddenly feel like you're in free fall. You're suddenly in space rather than in the line. And the sense of hurtling in space can get kind of intense, but then you're entering into it more gradually. But that's really part of that change in your perception of time.
Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jaya Kula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.